The World Food Program warns of a worrying humanitarian situation in Ethiopia. Autonomous vehicles, high-resolution televisions, and video games. A look at 2016's most exciting technology. And welcome to the jungle. A legendary heavy metal band confirms an upcoming reunion. Africa 54 starts right now.
Good evening and welcome. I'm Vincent Makori. This is Africa 54. We'll have those stories in a moment. But first, outcast nation North Korea announced that it has successfully conducted a thermonuclear hydrogen bomb test Wednesday, defying again United Nations resolutions banning the country's nuclear weapons program. VOS Brian Padden reports from Seoul that the United States, Japan, South Korea, and to some degree China are all condemning Pyongyang's latest provocation.
Reports Wednesday morning that a 5.1 magnitude earthquake occurred near Punggye-ri, where North Korea conducted its last 3 nuclear tests, were the first indication that the seismic activity there was man-made. North Korea's state television soon broadcast a special announcement claiming it successfully detonated a hydrogen bomb that is much more powerful and destructive than an atomic bomb. After North Korea's 3rd nuclear test in 2013, the United Nations Security Council passed resolutions banning Pyongyang from conducting further nuclear and offensive weapons tests and imposed harsh economic sanctions against the Kim Jong-un regime. South Korean President Park Geun-hye and Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe promised to punish North Korea for its nuclear provocation, while China said only that it firmly opposes Pyongyang's action. The United States also denounced the attack, but has so far responded cautiously. It has yet to verify Pyongyang's claim that it has indeed detonated a hydrogen bomb. The United Nations Security Council will hold an emergency meeting Wednesday to discuss the North Korean nuclear test. It is expected that Washington and its allies will press for harsher sanctions. Brian Padden, VOA News, Seoul.
Well, thanks, Brian. Now to Africa, where lower rainfall linked to El Nino is expected to lead to more months of drought in parts of the continent, particularly in East Africa and in the Horn of Africa. Ethiopia, one of the worst heat countries, is already experiencing its worst drought in decades. El Nino-related drought has decimated food crops and led to poor harvests in the country. Experts say some 8.2 million Ethiopians out of a population of nearly 100 million need food aid. Most of those affected by drought live in rural areas and depend on agriculture and livestock for their livelihoods and food. The World Food Program warns that humanitarian needs in Ethiopia had increased since the beginning of 2015 due to the El Nino weather phenomenon.
The World Food Program is saying today that humanitarian needs in Ethiopia have tripled since the beginning of 2015, as severe drought in some regions exacerbate the strongest El Nino in decades, cause successive harvest failures and widespread livestock death. Out of 10 million people now requiring urgent humanitarian assistance, the World Food Program is expected to support the government in meeting the needs of 7.6 million people in 2016. Yet so far, less than 5% of the resources required for the first 6 months of the year are available.
Failed rains during the spring and summer have sparked food and water shortages in the Horn of Africa nation, which boasts one of the continent's highest growth rates but depends heavily on rain-fed farming. El Nino, marked by warming sea surface temperatures in the Pacific Ocean, causes extremes such as scorching weather in some areas of the globe and heavy rains and floods in others. Meteorologists expect El Nino to peak in January. The government of Ethiopia recently unveiled a comprehensive plan to respond to the immediate needs of those most affected, with the international community pledging $300 million. However, an estimated $1.4 billion for emergency food, clean water and nutrition and health is needed to help save the lives of the most vulnerable.
The World Food Programme also says that the government is leading a well-coordinated response and has devoted enormous resources of its own to addressing the growing humanitarian needs, but that the crisis and the scale urgently requires significant support from the international community.
African countries are being encouraged to take up climate change adaptation efforts, such as planting new trees and improving soil and water conservation, among other things, to respond to disaster forecasts. Well, the UN peacekeeping mission in Central African Republic says it was investigating new allegations of sexual abuse of minors by peacekeepers in the conflict-torn African nation. The mission says that staff of the UN Children's Fund, based in Bangui, have had 4 visits with 4 alleged child victims. The head of the UN mission, Parfait Onanga Anyanga, vows to track down and punish the alleged culprits. It was not clear how many peacekeepers were involved in the alleged abuse or what countries they were from. Last month, an independent review panel accused the UN and its agencies of grossly mishandling allegations of child sexual abuse in 2013 and 2014 by international peacekeepers in the country. Well, the governor of Yemen's port city of Aden has survived an apparent assassination attempt. A car bomb detonated Tuesday as the convoy carrying Governor Aidarus al-Zubaidi passed by. Al-Zubaidi was not hurt, but several bodyguards were wounded. No one has claimed responsibility for the attack. But a pro-Islamic State group was behind last month's bombing that killed al-Zubaid's predecessor. Tuesday's attack came a day after a gun battle in Aden between Yemeni forces and secessionist militants, one of a number of groups jockeying for power in Yemen as they tried to drive out Houthi rebels who control the capital, Sana'a. Saudi ground forces are in Yemen supporting the international recognized government. Well, for the latest on Yemen, I'm joined on the phone by Zaid Al-Alaya. He's a Sana'a-based journalist. Zaid, briefly describe the situation in Yemen today.
Where I live in Sana'a, I would say from the early hours of the morning of Tuesday and also the day before, for the past, let's say at the beginning of the week, Sana'a has been subject to airstrikes day and night. And today in the morning at 8:30, there were like several airstrikes targeting a number of areas, residential areas, and most of the students of all the schools were evacuated because of the airstrikes. And also one of the blind centers called An-Nur was targeted, which is a house of more than 250 blinds. There were no reports about casualties, but the building of these blind people were completely destroyed. I know from my sources that also there are airstrikes in Hodeidah today. There are like 2 big fires took place on Hodeidah because of airstrikes. And also there were a lot of reports about the use of cluster bombs, not just in Hajjah, but also in Sana'a. The United Nations just issued a report talking about the remnant of more than 29 cluster bombs that were used in Hajjah.
Now, Zaid, there was an attempt at a ceasefire. Does it mean that that is all forgotten now? There's no effort to have some ceasefire?
I'm not sure that like all the ceasefire, all the truths that were announced by the UN or the KS coalition or the government in Riyadh or the Houthis here, it was not respected by all sides.
Yes, so
I don't think the truth will happen. I don't think because of, like all the warring sides, they are not even slightly willing to give a sort of compromise in order to achieve peace in Yemen.
Well, we'll keep watching things as they developed in Yemen. Zaid, thank you very much. Zaid Al-Alaya reporting live from Sana'a. Now, U.S. President Barack Obama says that America is the most advanced country in the world, yet gun violence claims more lives in the U.S. than any other advanced nation. During an impassioned address at the White House on Tuesday, Mr. Obama outlined his plan to address the problem. VOA White House correspondent Mary Alice Salinas reports.
Massacres in Newtown, Connecticut, Roseburg, Oregon, and San Bernardino, California, all carried out with guns. President Barack Obama took his case for tackling the problem to the American people during a White House address.
People are dying. And the constant excuses for inaction no longer do. No longer suffice.
Surrounded by gun violence survivors and victims' families, Obama lashed out at the Republican-led Congress for rejecting efforts to toughen gun restrictions. He outlined executive actions he will take instead, including expanding background checks and gun law enforcement. And Obama offered an uncharacteristically emotional rebuttal to those who accuse him of violating the Second Amendment, which gives Americans the right to bear arms.
Our unalienable right to life and liberty and the pursuit of happiness, those rights were stripped from college kids in Blacksburg and Santa Barbara and from high schoolers at Columbine and from first graders in Newtown. First graders. And from every family who never imagined that their loved one would be taken from our lives by a bullet from a gun. Every time I think about those kids, it gets me mad.
Obama blamed powerful gun lobby groups for Congress's failure to adopt stricter gun laws. But critics argue the president's plan won't stop gun-related violence and that better enforcement is needed for existing laws to keep guns out of the wrong hands.
The president can attempt to make the gun lobbying industry or organizations into boogeymen if they want to. These are organizations that are standing up for the Second Amendment rights, which really protects our freedom.
Republicans have warned the president's executive actions will likely be challenged in court and could be reversed by a Republican president. Gun control advocates say Obama has sent a clear message that he will keep up the pressure on lawmakers to stop weapons from ending up in the hands of dangerous people. Mary Alice Salinas, VOA News, the White House.
Well, the U.S. has launched a cautious diplomatic effort to deal with a rift in relations and war of words between Saudi Arabia and Iran that resulted from the Saudi execution of leading Shia cleric Sheikh Namri al-Nimri. U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry has reached out to officials in both countries to urge calm in the dispute. Here's VOA's State Department correspondent Pam Dawkins.
The angry flare-up between Iran and Saudi Arabia following the cleric's execution and the storming of Saudi diplomatic missions in Iran is a long-term problem that the U.S. says can't be legislated from Washington.
Ultimately, solutions to problems in this region must come from leaders in this region.
The State Department says Washington is worried that the Saudi-Iranian rift could affect regional issues, including the planned UN-led talks on a political transition in Syria. Analyst David Andrew Weinberg.
Probably the most significant way in which it's an impediment may be the extent to which regional diplomats may be less interested in focusing on the construction of such a Syrian meeting and more focused on the immediate tensions in the Gulf.
Another analyst says the U.S. is trapped in a region that it cannot fix or leave.
We're caught in the middle of nations that cooperate with us on certain issues but oppose us on others. And that's exactly what you're seeing here with the Saudis and the Iranians.
Also, the flare-up could spill over into neighboring countries.
It's possible that the Iranians will now intensify their support for the Houthi rebels in Yemen. It's conceivable the Iranians will try to stir the pot among Shia communities in Bahrain and even in Saudi Arabia proper. And you're going to see these tensions play out in Syria as well as the Iranians beef up their support for the Assad regime.
Analysts say this latest flare-up could also further exacerbate sectarian dynamics in the region, which would complicate U.S. initiatives and could ultimately threaten U.S. interests. Pam Dawkins, VOA News, the State Department.
Well, I want to know what you think about Africa 54 and the stories we covered. Join the conversation on Facebook. The address is Africa54. Check out our headlines 24/7 on voaafrica.com. Find me on Twitter at VOA Vincent Makori. Well, coming up, technology buffs brace for 2016 breakthroughs. Stay with us.
From science and technology, here's what's new.
It's the MSR Guardian Water Purifier, and the company calls it a game changer. It's a canister with a hand pump at one end, rubber tubing off the other. At the end of this tubing is a filter. Actually, they call it a pre-filter. The Guardian can purify water you wouldn't step in, much less drink. Water is pumped through the pre-filter to the main filter, and MSR Steve Schwensen says the main filter is made of hollow fibers that have pores so small it can eliminate particulate, bacteria, and even viruses from water.
They have small pores in them that the water is filtered through. If those pores are smaller than any virus, which is the smallest microbiological contaminant we can have, if they're smaller than that, nothing can get through.
Schwensen says the Guardian can purify 2.5 liters of water in about a minute and is self-cleaning. He says the device will be on sale in January of 2016 for about $350. For VOA's What's New, I'm Todd Grossans.
I am Sheikha Sali, host and senior editor of VOA's international call-in talk show, Straight Talk Africa.
Today we'll examine the tobacco industry.
We pretty much touch on anything that you can think of. Politics, health issues, human rights issues, you name it, we talk about it. The issues that we discuss are pertinent to most people on the African continent. A very, very rare and unique opportunity to interact with their leaders.
Well, the world's biggest consumer electronics show opens Wednesday in Las Vegas, and the internet is buzzing with expectation. VOA's George Putich is there and says we can expect big news about several different technologies, including autonomous vehicles, high-resolution television, and video games.
Major TV manufacturers are going to try to convince buyers that their present HD TVs are obsolete and that they should upgrade to 4K or even 8K resolution sets. Those numbers refer to ultra-high-definition screens that provide up to 4,000 or 8,000 pixels horizontal resolution, rendering pictures very close to reality. Another technology expected to show important advances is virtual reality, with goggles for transporting video gamers to different worlds.
We truly believe that it is going to bring new people into gaming that haven't been in gaming before.
Technology developments and extensive testing of self-driving cars over the past year strongly point towards a possible unveiling of more sophisticated autonomous vehicles. Manufacturers are racing to introduce a car that will take over the steering during tedious parts of driving, such as long stretches of highway or during rush hour traffic.
We actually have autonomous driving where the car will actually steer itself and completely accelerate and brake in stop-and-go traffic. So it really improves the quality of life for the driver, and it makes the driving experience much more safer.
Other technologies expected to announce new developments are wearable devices, not only smart watches, but smart glasses and even smart rings. Undoubtedly, there will be new smartphones with all kinds of useful and not so useful apps. And of course, there will be a lot of robots, from small ones you can put in your pocket to full-size delivery robots.
Instead of getting the delivery by somebody coming up to your door and knocking on your door, you would get it by a robot.
Experts say 2016 may turn out to be yet another year of interesting and exciting technological innovations. George Putich, VOA News, Washington.
Well, it's been a turbulent start to 2016 for world financial markets, with big drops in the value of shares across the world Monday. Well, the sell-off began in China, where concerns are growing over the quickening pace of the slowdown, as Henry Ridgwell reports.
Stock markets in the cities of Shanghai and Shenzhen were suspended Monday after falling more than 7% on the opening trading day of 2016. The sell-off triggered the Chinese government's so-called circuit breaker mechanism for the first time, a system designed to prevent volatility by halting trades.
I'm in favor of the circuit breaker mechanism, but the government implemented it on the first day. It's kind of like testing the market.
It's the millions of Chinese investors like Mr. Wu, many of them pensioners, that drive volatility, says analyst John Driffel of Birkbeck College, University of London.
The Chinese stock market is populated by a large number of small investors who are very prone to panics and booms and crashes. They're exchanging information and rumours. These are stock market players with a very short-term perspective. They're gambling with small amounts of life savings.
The falls were driven by a survey showing that activity in Chinese factories contracted for the 10th straight month in December and at a sharper pace than in November.
This just renewed the same fears that dogged a lot of last year's trading, namely that the slowdown in China's economy could be set to speed up.
Those fears were echoed in European and US markets, which saw declines of several percent. Figures due out later this year are expected to show that China posted its weakest economic growth for 25 years in 2015, slipping to around 7%. But that's a natural consequence of China's rebalancing economy, says Driffel.
The rapid economic growth of China was always going to be a temporary, perhaps a medium-term phenomenon, but not a permanent phenomenon. I mean, when China approaches the level of real incomes per head or productivity per head of developed economies, it's going to grow at the same speed.
Analysts say concerns over worsening tensions between Saudi Arabia and Iran are also weighing on stock markets and driving up the price of oil. Henry Ridgewell for VOA News, London.
Well, it's time now for a short break. Still to come on Africa 54. Headbangers of the world rejoice one of the most popular metal bands in history is getting back together. We'll be right back.
Hamilton Live is a live audience performance. With live music, you have that interaction. There's nothing like getting that immediate feedback from the folks that you're performing to. They feel it and they respond back to you. You see it in their eyes. You know that you're connecting with them. Like if any form of communication, it's that response that you get back.
If you've just joined us, I'm Mariama Diallo, and here is a quick recap of today's headlines. In Libya, 2 guards are killed and 16 wounded as the Islamic State group targets checkpoints near Es-Sider oil port for a second day. In Nigeria, the head of the International Monetary Fund determined on Tuesday that the country's failing economy does not need assistance of the IMF. We stay in Nigeria, where Shiite women gather in Kaduna to protest the arrest of their leader, Sheikh Ibrahim El-Zakzaki. Finally, in Algeria, the government releases draft constitutional reforms involving parliamentary and the presidency, as well as the country's official language. That's all for today. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.
Welcome back to Africa 54. Here's what's trending. Big news for fans of 80s rock. It is official. Guns N' Roses is reuniting, and they are doing it at Coachella. The 2-weekend, 3-day festival takes place in April in California and will feature the legendary band as one of the headliners. Rumors of the band's reunion have been swirling around since December. Now, the appearance at Coachella will be their first together in 2 decades. The band will headline both Saturdays of the festival. No word about whether the legendary band's reunion will lead to a new album. Well, and finally, a dancing teacher busts all the right moves. Educator Ron Clark has gotten plenty of attention for his energetic and unique teaching methods. He's even appeared on Oprah, where he has discussed the school he founded in Atlanta called the Ron Clark Academy. This week, Clark posted a video of himself and a few of his students rocking out together. They show off several dance moves as part of the Bet You Can Do It Like Me challenge, and people were really into it. Within 14 hours of posting, the video had been viewed more than 1.5 million times and shared more than 44,000 times. And that is what's trending today. Now, the Abidjan Zoo is slowly coming back to life after years of crisis and funding shortfalls. It became a symbol of devastation when thousands of animals starved during the 2010-2011 conflict amid fighting outside its walls. New lions and zebras have arrived, but hurdles remain to restoring the zoo to its glory days. Emily Eob reports from Abidjan.
It's another busy Saturday in the Abidjan National Zoo, the only zoo in Ivory Coast, as visitors flock to get a glimpse of primates, hippos and crocodiles.
This species we've just seen is the slender-snouted crocodile. It is endangered and protected by the United Nations. Do you understand? So we must protect them.
In its heyday 15 years ago, the zoo had about 500 animals from 50 species. But the various crises that swept the country took a toll on the zoo. During the post-election violence in 2010 and 2011, a third of the animals died of hunger. Zookeeper Tia Lama remembered having to climb trees to fetch leaves to feed the herbivores, but it wasn't enough.
We lost a lot of animals. There was no food. We couldn't go out to get some. There was a lot of damages. We lost 6 lions.
4 years ago, the Ivorian government voted a rehabilitation plan for the zoo to restore damaged buildings and buy new animals. Since last year, lions, ostriches and zebras are back, attracting their fair share of visitors.
It's a fun place. A lot of children don't know the animals, so the zoo allows them to get to know them.
Besides government funding, Director Samuka Kane says the zoo gets help from volunteers and donations to improve the place.
If you have unexpected things happening that are not planned in the budget, financing can be a problem. So in some cases, donations help us with some rehabilitations.
And the need for renovation remains great, as old infrastructure can be a safety hazard for animals. Last May, a large chunk of the enclosure wall of the chimpanzee collapsed after heavy rains. They had to be relocated in small cages, which led to fight and a couple of primates killed. The zoo is still waiting for finances to rebuild the wall. Despite its limited funds, the zoo entrance fees hasn't changed in over a decade, between 10 and 50 cents per person. Kane says it is because the zoo is attached to its social role.
I walk around in the park and listen to the visitors. I can tell that people are realizing more and more that animals are useful and are not only for eating, but are also part of our environment.
Ils font partie donc de notre système, de notre milieu de vie. Future plans include the opening of a children's zoo as well as a restaurant and a gift shop. Emily Eob for VOA News in Abidjan.
Well, and that's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. For more news, tune in to VOA's evening radio show, Africa News Tonight at 1800 UTC. And in the mornings to Daybreak Africa between 0300 and 0600 UTC. That's Monday through Friday. Thanks a lot for watching from all of us in Washington. Have a good night.
Welcome to the Voice of America's News Words.
Does this word mean something good has happened?
Unleashed. The president is sending Secretary of State John Kerry to the Middle East to help build a coalition to defeat the militants who have unleashed a wave of violence that has included attacks on Iraq's Christians and other minority communities, and recently the videotaped killing of American journalist James Foley.
Unleashed means to let something very powerful happen quickly.
It is like taking a leash off a dog and letting it attack someone. In our story, the militants unleashed or set off a wave of violence.
Usually, unleashed does not mean something good.
So, the next time you hear the word unleashed, you will know what this news word means.